The word struck harder than any slap ever could. "Get this beggar out," my father barked, his voice carrying across the glittering hotel lobby like a trumpet blast meant to announce my defeat. For a moment, the room froze. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, their light scattering across polished marble floors, bouncing off gold accents and champagne flutes. The air smelled of roses and vanilla, a curated fragrance meant to impress the high-profile guests already filing into the grand ballroom. But to me, everything stank of betrayal. I stood there in my tailored navy blue suit, the one I'd picked carefully for this occasion, believing I was here to celebrate family. My chest tightened as I watched the security guard's hand hover awkwardly near my elbow. He didn't touch me, not yet, but the hesitation in his eyes told me he knew exactly how cruel this moment was. My mother stood a few feet away in her glittering silver gown. She didn't look at me. Her eyes darted away, as though acknowledging me would somehow stain the illusion of perfection she worked so tirelessly to maintain. I searched her face for a flicker of sympathy, something, anything, that would remind me she was still my mother. But she gave me nothing. And then there was Victoria, my younger sister, 32, perfectly styled in a dress I had no doubt was purchased with money that once came from me. Her lips curled into that familiar smirk, the one I'd seen since childhood. It was the expression she wore whenever she thought she had won. "Dad," I started, my voice steady despite the sharpness of the glass words cutting through me. "I was invited." "You heard me." He cut me off, his hand gesturing toward the guard like a judge ordering an execution. "She doesn't belong here." The guests whispered, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. I caught fragments of their murmurs. "Isn't that his eldest? What happened?" So embarrassing. Their eyes slid over me with curiosity and judgment, as if they were watching the fall of some tragic character in a play. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. Instead, I straightened my shoulders, looked the security guard directly in the eyes, and gave him the faintest nod. His relief was visible. I would walk out with dignity, not dragged like the criminal they wanted me to appear to be. As I turned, I saw Victoria whispering something into Jared's ear, her husband, tall and broad-shouldered, standing stiff with his hands in his pockets. He didn't look at me either. Just like my mother, just like my father. They had all chosen silence as their weapon. I walked out of that ballroom with my head high. Not because I wasn't broken inside, I was. But because I had learned long ago that my tears only ever fed their laughter. By the time I reached the underground parking garage, the ache in my chest had given way to a cold, steady calm. I slipped into my car, shut the door, and for the first time allowed my hands to tremble. My phone screen lit up as I unlocked it, opening my banking app. My pulse slowed as I stared at the numbers. $7,200. Banquet catering canceled. $12,000. Victoria's Maldives honeymoon flights revoked. $4,800. Mom's spa weekend for her book club terminated. $52,000. Beach condo payments frozen. One by one, I shut it all down. Each transaction felt like reclaiming a piece of myself they had stolen. They thought my father's retirement package was funding this grand display. They believed his years of hard work had paid for champagne fountains and imported orchids. But the truth? Every dollar had flowed through my accounts, my company, my sacrifices. They had built their illusion of wealth on my back. As I drove home through the city lights, my phone vibrated endlessly. First my mother, then my father, then Victoria, then numbers I didn't recognize, probably relatives wondering why their flights were suddenly voided. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the screen was flooded with missed calls and voicemails. Then came the pounding at my door. I peered through the peephole and saw Jared, his shirt wrinkled, his face red with frustration. His fist banged against the wood. "You need to fix this right now," he shouted, his voice echoing in the hallway. "They just canceled our food, the hotel won't release the rooms, and our honeymoon tickets got voided while we were checking in online." I leaned against the door frame, the solid wood between us grounding me. "Strange," I replied calmly. "Sounds like someone didn't check who actually owned those payments." He blinked, confused. You did this because they kicked you out? No, I said, my tone steady. I did this because they forgot the first rule of biting the hand that feeds you. Make sure that hand isn't holding all the receipts. Silence followed. He tried to peer past me into my apartment, maybe searching for signs of regret. But regret had no place here anymore. On my desk sat a thick folder I had prepared years ago, neatly labeled in bold letters. Contingency. Inside were color-coded tabs, signed contracts, and payment records, all with my LLC listed as financial sponsor. Every signature carried my authority. Every clause protected me. I had warned them 3 years ago. If they treated me like a bank, I would start acting like one. Now it was time to collect. When Jared finally stormed off, muttering something about lawyers, I sat in my quiet living room and let the stillness sink in. For years, I had told myself that family was worth the sacrifice, that funding their vacations, repairs, and parties was investing in love, that eventually they would see me, not just my wallet. But tonight I realized the truth. They never saw me at all. To them, I was not Rachel, the eldest daughter. Not Rachel, the businesswoman who had built a company from scratch. Not Rachel, the woman who had carved her independence one sleepless night at a time. To them, I was only Rachel the bank. Rachel the safety net. Rachel the beggar when she finally said no. And as I held that contingency folder in my hands, a strange calm spread through me. They thought they had humiliated me in front of 40 people. But what they didn't know was that I had just begun to reveal the truth. Truth written in contracts, signed receipts, and canceled transactions. The humiliation was theirs. They just hadn't realized it yet.
The next morning, my phone buzzed non-stop before the sun had even risen. Calls, texts, voicemails. It was chaos pouring into my hands. My father's voice message came first, sharp and commanding. Rachel, fix this, right now. You don't embarrass your family like this. Do you know how important last night was? I deleted it before it finished. Then my mother. Her tone was more fragile, layered with practiced sorrow. Sweetheart, you can't just cancel everything. Your sister's wedding is ruined. Think of what people will say. We'll talk later, but please fix this. I deleted hers too. Victoria's text messages were the worst. Pages of insults, threats, and empty bravado. You'll regret this. You're jealous because I got the life you couldn't. No one will ever forgive you. I smiled faintly. Forgiveness had long lost its value. By noon they escalated. Jared showed up again, but this time he wasn't alone. My father stood beside him, face red with fury, veins bulging at his temples. My mother trailed behind, sunglasses covering her eyes though the sky was overcast. I didn't open the door. Instead, I stepped out onto the balcony 2 floors above, coffee in hand, and looked down at them. You've made your point, Rachel, my father shouted, his voice echoing against the concrete walls. Now stop this nonsense before you ruin everything. Ruin everything, said coolly. Dad, I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped paying for it. He cursed under his breath, but Jared jumped in, his voice desperate. Rachel, come on. Be reasonable. Victoria's friends flew in from out of state. They're stuck in hotel rooms that aren't even covered anymore. The venue says they won't let us in without payment. You can't just. I can, I interrupted. And I did. Because the truth, gentlemen, is that it was never your wedding. Not really. It was mine. My money. My name on the contracts. My signature. And last night when you called me a beggar, that was the moment you forfeited every single privilege I allowed you to enjoy. My mother's voice cracked from behind her glasses. Rachel, please. Don't do this to us. I leaned on the railing, studying her carefully. Do this to you. Mom, I've been doing things for you for years. Paid off your debts. Funded your so-called charity luncheons. Kept this family's reputation shining. But the second I walk into a room, I'm treated like an outsider. Last night wasn't the beginning, it was the end. And now I'm collecting what I'm owed. By the following day, The fallout began in earnest. The wedding planner filed a breach of contract claim, citing unpaid balances my family thought had already been covered. The caterer sent invoices directly to Victoria and Jared, demanding immediate payment. The luxury hotel where they had booked blocks of rooms released a statement. All reservations were void due to fraudulent third-party payments. The gossip blogs pounced within hours. High society wedding crumbles overnight. Parker family faces scandal as funds vanish. Bride's own sister linked to chaos. My inbox overflowed with interview requests. Reporters smelled blood, and my family was the bleeding prey. But the best part, I didn't leak a word. I didn't have to. The truth was already written in every bank statement and cancellation notice. Their downfall wasn't orchestrated by me. It was the natural consequence of taking advantage of me for too long. On the third day, Victoria finally came herself. She showed up at my office, unannounced, wearing oversized sunglasses and a trench coat like a celebrity avoiding paparazzi. She pushed through my receptionist and stormed into my glass-walled corner office, slamming the door behind her. "How could you do this to me?" she demanded, ripping off her glasses. Her eyes were swollen, smeared mascara clinging to her lashes. "You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. Do you understand what this has done to my reputation?" I stayed seated, calmly tapping my pen against the open folder on my desk. "Your reputation," echoed. "You mean the one you built using my money? Because without me, you'd still be living in Dad's basement." Her face flushed. "You're just bitter. You've always been jealous of me. I'm the one people love. I'm the one with the friends, the husband, the life. You're nothing but a bank account." I finished for her, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, I know. That's all I've ever been to you. But banks keep records, Victoria. And when people default on their loans, banks collect. That's what's happening now." I slid a folder across the desk. Inside were itemized lists of expenses I had covered over the last 5 years. Vacations, designer clothes, private schools for her children, payments for her failed startup idea. Every check had her name attached, every transfer logged with dates and amounts. "This," I said, tapping the folder, "is what you owe me." She stared at the papers, her hands trembling. "You wouldn't." "I already have," I said. "The documents have been filed. You're legally responsible for repayment." The wedding collapse was just the first domino. You and Jared are about to learn what happens when you take and never give back. Her breath hitched. She backed away as though I'd struck her, tears welling in her eyes. For the first time in her life, Victoria Parker looked small. "You're not family anymore," she whispered. I stood, my voice low but unshakable. "No, Victoria. I was never family to you. I was just the hand that fed you. And you bit it." She fled the office, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. I didn't chase her. I simply sat back down, exhaled slowly, and allowed myself the smallest of smiles. By week's end, the cracks in their lives had widened into chasms. Creditors circled. Friends distanced themselves. Social circles whispered. Every facade they had built began to crumble. And through it all, I didn't lift a finger. I didn't need to. The reckoning had already begun. The only question left was how far I wanted it to go. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and faint coffee, an odd mix of dignity and exhaustion. Rows of benches lined the gallery, already filled with reporters, socialites, and curious onlookers. For the Parker family, this was supposed to be a private matter, quietly smoothed over behind closed doors. But their arrogance had drawn attention, and now the trial was front-page news. I walked into the courtroom wearing a black pantsuit, tailored sharp enough to cut through steel. Every step echoed against the tiled floor. My father sat at the plaintiff's table, jaw tight, eyes fixed on me like I was the enemy of the state. My mother sat beside him, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, playing the grieving mother for the cameras. And Victoria, she looked hollow. Her once perfect hair was frizzed at the ends, her dress wrinkled, her confidence shattered. Their lawyer, a smug man in an overpriced suit, adjusted his tie as he flipped through his notes. He looked at me like I was already defeated. I almost pitied him. He had no idea what was coming. The judge entered, gavel striking. Court is now in session. Case number 4851. Parker versus Parker. The plaintiffs allege financial fraud, misappropriation of funds, and malicious interference with contractual obligations. The defendant, Ms. Rachel Parker, is present and has filed a counterclaim. The words hung in the air. Counterclaim. My father's head snapped toward me, fury flashing in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to fight back. He thought I'd fold under the weight of his reputation like I always had. Not this time. The plaintiff's lawyer stood first, his voice dripping with practiced authority. Your Honor, the defendant used her position of financial control to deliberately sabotage a wedding event of significant social importance. She canceled payments, revoked services, and inflicted reputational damage on her sister, Victoria Parker, and by extension, the entire Parker family. This behavior was malicious, calculated, and unbecoming of any family member. I almost laughed. Unbecoming of any family member. As if they hadn't disowned me publicly just days earlier. He continued, pacing dramatically. We seek restitution for the damages caused. Emotional, financial, and reputational. We will prove that Ms. Parker acted out of jealousy and spite, not legality. When he sat down, smugness radiated from him like perfume. My father patted his shoulder as though victory were guaranteed. Then it was my turn. I rose slowly, letting the silence stretch before I spoke. My voice was calm, steady, but every word carried weight. Your Honor, what the plaintiffs fail to mention is that every contract, every service, every payment they are accusing me of sabotaging was mine, not theirs. The wedding they claim I ruined was funded entirely by me, through my company accounts. Their flights, their catering, their luxury venue. It was all under my name, my credit, my liability. When they humiliated me, when they called me a beggar in front of dozens of witnesses, they forgot something crucial. I pulled out a thick binder and placed it on the defense table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. They forgot the receipts. The courtroom murmured. Reporters scribbled furiously. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. I opened the binder and began sliding documents across to the bailiff. Exhibit A. Contracts with the catering company signed by me. Exhibit B. Hotel agreements, with my LLC as guarantor. Exhibit C. International flight reservations purchased on my corporate card. Exhibit D. 5 years of financial transfers. Money I gave directly to my sister Victoria and her husband Jared, totaling over $200,000. The judge flipped through the documents, his brow furrowing deeper with every page. This isn't fraud, Your Honor, I said firmly. This is philanthropy. This is me, 4 years, carrying a family that never once acknowledged my support. And when I decided enough was enough, they turned around and accused me of sabotage. But the truth is simple. You cannot sabotage what you own. My father slammed his hand against the table. Lies, he roared. She's twisting everything. We built this family reputation with our own hands. Objection, Your Honor, I cut in smoothly. He's not testifying. He's posturing. The judge's gavel struck. Sustained. Mr. Parker, control yourself. For the first time my father faltered. He wasn't the commanding patriarch here. He was just another man bound by rules he couldn't bend. The plaintiff's lawyer tried to recover, but his rhythm broke. He sputtered about intent and malice, but the paper trail was undeniable. Every document bore my name. Every dollar could be traced back to me. Then came the final blow. Your Honor, I said, sliding one last envelope forward. This is my counterclaim. Over the past 5 years, I've provided financial support to the plaintiffs under the assumption of repayment or mutual benefit. Instead, they slandered me, attempted to defame my character, and publicly humiliated me. I am seeking restitution for unpaid debts totaling $350,000, plus damages for emotional distress. Gasps rippled through the room. Victoria's face went pale, her hands trembling as she clutched the arm of her chair. Jared leaned toward her, whispering furiously, but she shook her head as tears welled in her eyes. My mother pressed her tissue harder against her eyes, but I saw the truth. It wasn't sorrow. It was fear. The judge raised an eyebrow. Do the plaintiffs have any evidence to dispute these financial records? Their lawyer hesitated, flipping through his papers desperately. We need time to review. You had time, the judge snapped. These records are thorough, notarized, and verifiable. Unless you have contradictory evidence, this case may not be as straightforward as you presented. My father's face turned crimson. You can't do this, Rachel. We are your family. I stood taller, looking him directly in the eye. Family doesn't call their daughter a beggar while living off her generosity. Family doesn't use someone until they're empty and then throw them away. No, father. You're not my family. Not anymore. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. The gavel struck again. This court will recess for review, the judge declared. But from the evidence presented, the plaintiffs may want to reconsider their position. As the courtroom emptied, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. I walked past them without a word, my head high, my binder clutched firmly in my hand. Behind me, I could hear my father arguing with his lawyer, my mother sobbing into her tissue, and Victoria whispering in a trembling voice. She's going to destroy us. I didn't turn back. 'Cause she was right. The courtroom wasn't the end of the reckoning. It was only the beginning. The judgment came 2 weeks later. I sat in the courtroom once again, the same polished wood, the same echoes of footsteps. But this time the atmosphere felt different. Heavier for them, lighter for me. The judge adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. After reviewing the evidence presented, the court finds in favor of the defendant, Ms. Rachel Parker, on all counts. The plaintiff's claims are dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, restitution of $350,000 is awarded to the defendant, with an additional $50,000 in damages. The gavel struck. Final. Irrevocable. A ripple of shock spread through the gallery. Reporters whispered, cameras flashed. My father's face drained of color, his jaw slack as though he couldn't comprehend the defeat. My mother wept into her hands, not out of sadness for me, but for the collapse of the image she had spent decades constructing. And Victoria, she sat frozen, her eyes glassy, her mouth slightly open, as if the world had suddenly tilted beneath her. I stood, smoothing my suit, and gathered my binder. As I walked out, I felt the weight of years, of silence, of sacrifice, of invisibility, finally lift off my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying them anymore. They were carrying the consequences. The weeks that followed were a strange mixture of chaos and peace. On one side, the Parker family's downfall became a media spectacle. Headlines blared their humiliation. Prominent family bankrolled by estranged daughter. Court awards $400,000 to betrayed heir. Friends distanced themselves, creditors circled, and invitations to high society events stopped arriving. On the other side, my life felt oddly quiet, peaceful. My phone, once buzzing constantly with their demands, was still. No more desperate calls for money. No more manipulative guilt trips. Just silence. And in that silence, I began to heal. Healing wasn't instant. It came in waves. Some days a flood of relief, other days a tide of grief. I grieved the family I had never truly had, the love I once believed existed. But with each wave I grew stronger. I poured myself into my company, expanding it with a new purpose. Not just profit but legacy. I launched a foundation to support women entrepreneurs, especially those who, like me, had been told they weren't enough unless they gave everything away. The first time I stood on stage at a conference, speaking to a room full of young women about financial independence and self-respect, I felt something shift inside me. No longer was I the invisible daughter, the family ATM, the scapegoat. I was Rachel Parker, self-made, unbroken, unashamed. One afternoon months later, I received a letter in the mail. Not an email, not a text. A handwritten letter. The handwriting was familiar, Victoria's. My hands trembled as I opened it. Rachel, you won. I know that. I don't have excuses left. Jared left me, the house is gone, and the friends I thought I had disappeared when the money did. I used to think I was the lucky one in this family. Turns out I was the fool. You were the strong one all along. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know. I finally see you. Not as a bank. Not as competition. As my sister. I read it twice, tears stinging my eyes. For a long moment I sat with it, unsure how to feel. Part of me wanted to tear it up, to reject the gesture as too little, too late. But another part of me, the part that had healed, the part that had grown, knew better. Forgiveness didn't mean letting them back in. Forgiveness meant setting myself free. I placed the letter in a drawer, not forgotten, but not a chain around my neck either. The Parker name faded from society columns, their influence a relic of the past. My father retired into obscurity, my mother clung to dwindling appearances, and Victoria slowly rebuilt a quieter life. I didn't attend her new wedding years later, though I heard about it. I didn't need to, because I had already built my own legacy. My foundation grew, funding hundreds of businesses, each success story a thread in the tapestry of something bigger than myself. I became a mentor, a speaker, a symbol of what happens when someone finally says, enough. And through it all I lived in peace. No more walking into rooms wondering if I belonged. No more trying to earn love with money. I had learned the most important lesson of all. Self-worth is not given by others. It's claimed by yourself. One evening, I stood on the balcony of my new home, overlooking the city skyline. The sun dipped low, casting the glass towers in gold. For a moment, I thought of the hotel ballroom, the chandeliers, the night it all fell apart. But then I smiled, because that night I thought I had lost everything. In truth, it was the night I finally began to live.